Hey guys, and welcome to the second ever episode of the Scene to Screen Film Podcast. I'm Kieran McLean, and joining me again for this episode is my good friend and fellow film fanatic, AJ Tarrant.
Now then, how you doing?
So what we're going to be doing in this episode is kind of looking back at the films we each saw in 2017 and giving you guys our top 5 films of last year. So without any further kind of discussion, let's get into it. AJ, why don't you kick us off with your number 5?
Right, yeah, so my number 5 pick is Good Time. This is kind of the surprise standout of the year for me. It's the latest film from the Safdie brothers in what I believe will be their breakout film. It's got a lot of press going around it at the moment, or it did when it was released. Basically, the plot revolves around these two brothers, Connie and Nick, and their botched bank robbery, which lands Nick in jail and Connie, played by Robert Pattinson, on a mad rush against time to find enough money to pay for Nick's bail bond before he's taken to a Rikers Island prison, which is known as a very dangerous prison. Nick's also, he's got learning disabilities, so he's not quite, his brother Connie is obviously worried for him. Although this is a low-key and fairly low-budget affair, I'd say it actually matches the best mainstream films of the year in terms of acting, cinematography, lighting, and it outdoes them in many ways too, particularly the soundtrack by One Who Tricks Point Never, aka Chuck Person, real name Daniel Lopatin, and it's easily one of my favourite scores of the decade, up there with The Master and Drive. Pattinson's performance is the kind of driving element of this film. And he's kind of intense in the way that young Pacino was intense, and it carries the film through its many twists and turns. There's a lot under the surface of Good Time, I think. There's satire, humour, social commentary, character study, and all of this is mixed in with all the elements of a superbly paced, pulse-pounding crime thriller. All the supporting roles are perfectly filled. You got appearances from Jennifer Jason Leigh and Barkhad Abdi, as well as previous Safdie brothers actor Buddy Duress as the bewildered petty criminal Ray. That was a great performance. And co-writer and director Benny Safdie himself in another stand-up performance as Connie's brother Nick. And after this, I just can't wait to see what the Safdie brothers do next. And yeah, that's my number 5 pick.
Yeah, Good Time is one of these films that you don't hear about very much at the beginning of the year. But when it lands in cinemas, it starts to get a lot of buzz. And like you said, it is a really well-made, well-acted story, and it deserves more attention. Unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to see Good Time until recently, but I pretty much agree with everything you've said, especially in regards to Robert Pattinson's performance. We see this character go through a lot of bad stuff as it explores this kind of underground world. And it's mainly because of Pattinson's performance that we stick with this character as the film progresses. Just to add to what you were saying as well, I think the style that the Safdie brothers bring to Good Time is really cool, because it's this kind of like really dirty and grimy film, and I think at times throughout it almost feels like you're watching a documentary. It's got that kind of really realistic documentary kind of style, so I really enjoyed that aspect of Good Time. Alright then, I'll jump on to my number 5, which is Wind River. This is a film that not a lot of people will have seen or even heard about. It's definitely a film that you should see. Buy it on Blu-ray, download it on iTunes. I couldn't recommend this film more. I'm not really a fan of describing a film to people, but I feel like I need to give some general information just so everyone out there knows what I'm talking about. Wind River takes place mostly on an American Indian reservation in Wyoming. It's covered in snow. There's a blizzard every 20 minutes. For the people living here, it's a really miserable kind of bad place to live. And then to top it off, an 18-year-old girl is found dead, murdered and raped in the snow. From there we see Jeremy Renner's character, who's a local hunter and a really good tracker. He works with Elizabeth Olsen's character, two Avengers, and they kind of work together. She's an FBI agent, and they kind of work together to figure out what's happened. So yeah, it's this really gritty kind of raw crime thriller, and with that comes a lot of really tense and badass scenes. but surprisingly, Wind River also has a lot of heart and emotion, which I really didn't expect walking into the cinema. A lot of times with crime thrillers, it can be kind of difficult to connect to the characters, but with Wind River, I think you almost immediately understand who these people are, you kind of get what they've been through, and you really end up caring about them and their lives, which is mostly because the two main actors are perfectly cast and deliver their absolute best in every single scene. I think that Wind River is yet another notch on Elizabeth Olsen's belt, and she's starting to really prove and show that she's a great actor. And then looking at Renner, I think this is arguably the best performance of his entire career. This is a really complex and messed up character. And there are a few things that have happened in this character's past that come into play, and I really enjoyed seeing how Renner delivered those more emotional kind of sequences in this film. Wind River is Taylor Sheridan's directorial debut, and he really couldn't have picked a better story to begin his filmography. This guy previously wrote the screenplay for Hell or High Water. That was one of my favourite films of 2016. And he also wrote Sicario, so that alone should get you excited for his first directed film. The way that Sheridan directs this story and the style that he uses is probably my favourite aspect, because many other directors would have just done a plain and simple, clean-cut version of this story, whereas Sheridan kind of delivers this raw look at this Indian reservation, and uses the mountains and everything around him to tell this story. I mean, I really can't tell you how much I appreciated and liked this film, and somehow it got even better the second time around.
Yeah, I've really got to see this. I misjudged it when it first came out because I thought it was just going to be like a sort of serial killer, thriller, crime sort of thing. But after having heard more about it and seeing some of the end lists that it appeared in, I realised I have completely underestimated it. And I should have known, Taylor Sheridan, I liked his other work, and I think Jeremy Renner's really good. So this is one that I need to sort of catch up on like straight away so I can kind of, directorial debuts are my kind of thing generally, so I'm definitely going to have to catch up on that one. Right, so I'll jump into my number 4, which is Blade Runner 2049. Now, I haven't seen many sequels that truly lift up the original movie, but Villeneuve's film definitely achieves this. Like, it puts as much into character development as it does its expansive world building, and it creates what I can only call a small-scale epic. The characters from the original don't just appear for the sake of a fan-pleasing cameo, they're actually deftly worked into the new story, and they are offered new ways to develop as characters. The new characters are rightfully kept centre stage, in particular Ryan Gosling's Kay. Gosling uses a minimalistic style, the style that he's sort of developed through films such as Drive and Place Beyond the Pines, and I think he uses it to even greater effect in this film. His facial expressions telling the audience way more than the terse lines that he delivers, but the standout performance for me is actually Dave Bautista. Although he only appears on screen for a very short amount of time, you can instantly sense a depth to his character. Like, the role feels lived in, as if Bautista's like playing his final scene in a much larger story where he was the protagonist. Obviously the cinematography is amazing. There's a lot I could say about this film, but sort of keep it short. I'll lead on to my only complaint, and in many ways it is a large one, and that's with the score. 2049, I think, could have taken the second or even the top spot on this list if it had a score that matched the quality of the original, in my opinion. I found the constant Zimmerisms grating and overly bassy, and they contain very few memorable moments as opposed to the original, which had many little motifs that you could kind of grab onto. A few of them are used in the film scores, in 2049 scores, and they're the best bits of the soundtrack. After having seen Watanabe's short animated tie-in Blackout 2022, and the magnificent score by Flying Lotus, I just can't help but imagine what might have been. But nonetheless, the film's plus points make up for this in abundance, and so it still sits comfortably in my number 4 spot.
Alright, so I'm not going to talk too much about Blade Runner 2049 just because it lands a little bit higher on my list, but I will say that I think you're absolutely right about Dave Bautista's performance. He didn't have a large role, but for me, it was probably the most memorable and one of the most impressive performances in the entire film. I think Bautista, because he kind of came from wrestling, He gets thrown into that typical bad actor pile, but I think his work in this film proves that he takes his work seriously, and he's good at what he does. Obviously, as a massive comic book fan, I love him as Drax in the Guardians of the Galaxy films, but as an actor, I think this is definitely the performance that'll make people kind of take a second look at him and maybe change how they see him, because this kind of proves that he is a really good actor. Like I said, I'm going to talk about Blade Runner 2049 a little bit more in a little while, so for now I'll jump on to my number 4, which is Baby Driver. Because when it comes to pure, unadulterated fun, Baby Driver is the film that probably steals the entire year for me. Just like Good Time and Wind River, this is a film that wasn't even on my radar at the beginning of 2017, but thankfully good reviews and good word of mouth came to my rescue, and I think I ended up seeing this film about 3 times in cinemas. I will admit that I'm not the biggest Edgar Wright fan. I know he has a lot of die-hard followers, but to be honest, other than Shaun of the Dead, I've not really liked any of his other films until Baby Driver. I can't really talk about Baby Driver without discussing the insane kind of style that Edgar Wright brought to the film. I can't really talk about Baby Driver without discussing the insane kind of style that Edgar Wright brought to the film. Everything from the costume design to the editing to the music, it's all really stylish and really cool, and somehow it all just fits together perfectly. Looking at it, you wouldn't think it would, but everything just kind of, it's like a jigsaw puzzle and it all fits together. And I don't think any other director could have done Baby Driver the same way that Edgar Wright did. It's just so fun, and in a world where most of these kind of action crime thrillers are just dumb, like all the Fast and Furious films, Baby Driver comes out and it's just a really smart film that also delivers the insane thrills that the audience expects. I think this is going to be one of those rare action films that we're still talking about in 10 or 20 years. And yeah, like I say, it's my number 4.
Yeah, Baby Driver, I really, really liked it. I can't say that I actually loved it, but I'm a big Edgar Wright fan. Loved Shaun of the Dead as soon as I saw it, and Hot Fuzz personally my favourite. I think that Baby Driver is a magnificent music movie. Like, the way it works music into the scenes, it's perfect, and that I cannot give it enough praise for. I had a few issues with it. I thought some of the performances were a little bit off, so it stopped me kind of fully loving it, although I did see it twice. And to be honest, I think, it's a solid entry in Edgar Wright's filmography. I think it's better than Scott Pilgrim, although I also enjoyed that. I think basically Edgar Wright's, he's working with kind of a new style here. He went backwards a bit with The World's End, which I also still loved, but I think the more films he does in America, he'll kind of get used to that style more. But at the same time, I really want him to come back to England and do another film here, because I just want him to be home. But, I can't diss Baby Driver. Really liked it. And what it does so uniquely to any other film. I can see why people love this film, and I just wish I did love it more. I'm not quite sure what it is. It's weird, but I don't know. Maybe with time I'll learn to love it, and I really hope so, because it's great. Right, I'll move on to my number 3, The Killing of a Sacred Deer. Yorgos Lanthimos strikes again. This is his second English language film, as well as his second collaboration with Colin Farrell. It's also starring Nicole Kidman and Barry Keoghan, who was also seen in this year's Dunkirk by Nolan. Lanthimos' disturbing take on an old Greek myth. It's as darkly humorous as The Lobster, but with the existential terror turned up to 11. In many ways, it is actually most similar to his first film, Dogtooth, from 2009, one of my personal favourites of all time, in that it sort of continues his breakdown of the nuclear family, like the traditional family setup. He kind of puts this family into a situation and just kind of sees how they get around it, and if they can get around it. But The Killing of a Sacred Deer is also very different to anything else he's done. It plays close to certain genre conventions while also simultaneously subverting them with his own brand of weirdness. Keoghan is definitely the standout role as Martin. However, I'm not really going to say anything much else, because this is truly a film that needs to be seen without any prior knowledge. It's a very strange and singular film. It will not be for everyone, that's for certain, but for those who like it, I think they'll love it. Lanthimos is one of my favourite modern directors, and this adds another bizarro classic to his already perfect record, and that's why it's a number 3 for me.
I've not actually had a chance to see Killing of a Sacred Deer yet, just because the cinemas around me never showed it. but it's definitely something that I really want to see, just because I'm a fan of this director. I really liked The Lobster, so I'm excited to see what he's been able to do with the follow-up. Not that it's a sequel or anything, but it's his kind of directorial follow-up. And somehow this film looks even stranger than any of his previous films. But like I said, I've not had a chance to see the film yet, so I can't really judge it. And I probably won't see it until it's available on iTunes or Netflix, wherever it ends up. So I'll just move straight on to my number 3. Which is War for the Planet of the Apes, which is obviously the follow-up to Rise and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and the conclusion to what I believe is one of the greatest film trilogies of all time. In this third film, we kind of see Caesar turn his back on the ideals that pushed him through the first 2 films. Caesar's always been this kind of character that wants to end human and ape conflict, but some really bad stuff happens in the first act, which sets him out on like this really cool revenge mission, which eventually brings him into contact with Woody Harrelson's character. But I'm not going to say anything more about the plot than that because I don't want to spoil anything. The main reason War for the Planet of the Apes lands in my top 5 is because not only is this a franchise that I've loved since birth, but it's one of those rare studio blockbusters, and I think of all the studio blockbusters, this recent Planet of the Apes trilogy, and specifically this third film, are perfect examples of how a studio should handle big budget CGI heavy films. Because we don't see character development sacrificed for a gag, and while there are big action sequences in this film, they're always in service of the characters. War for the Planet of the Apes is a film that isn't afraid to get dark and emotional, and more than anything, it isn't afraid to be a character-driven blockbuster, which isn't something we see from studio films very often, and I think that's all down to the director Matt Reeves. This guy took over the second film, and he kind of completely turned this franchise upside down and told a really human story that just happened to be about apes. Obviously, I can't talk about War for the Planet of the Apes and not touch on Andy Serkis's performance, and the performance capture work that goes into this film. For pretty much the entire film, you tune out and you kind of completely forget that these apes aren't real, because the technology and the performances from everyone, but specifically Andy Serkis, are incredible. There's one scene which is probably one of the best moments in the film, where Woody Harrelson's character looks up at Caesar and he says something about how human Caesar looks, and in that moment you kind of look and realise how impressive this technology really is, because you can see Andy Serkis behind the CGI, and once you see it, you see how great his performance is. And like I've been saying since the first film was released, I think Andy Serkis deserves some awards recognition for this film, and for his performance as Caesar in this entire trilogy, but it really doesn't look like he's going to get any nods for that, which is really upsetting because it really is a completely different kind of performance and one that deserves some attention.
See, I missed out on the first of the new ones because it came out at a time when it was a period where I didn't go to cinema much, purely because I didn't have enough money and didn't have enough time. And then once I started hearing everyone talking about them when I went to university, I started sort of thinking, before I think another case of me kind of misjudging something, I thought they were just kind of like monkey movies or something like that. Obviously apes, but I thought they were maybe just kind of rehashes of the originals, kind of taking a bit from some of the original sequels where they do go back and show the start of it. But after hearing everything that everyone said, I've realised that this is a trilogy I've got to see. So I didn't see it in cinema because, again, time and money. I didn't really have enough time to get the first 2 and watch them so I could appreciate it. But I'm definitely going to have fun just kind of sitting down and watching the whole trilogy just as it is, like that. Kind of basically what I'm going to do with Game of Thrones, wait till it's all over and watch it. And I think that'll be quite a unique experience, like, in itself. So, my number 2 is The Florida Project. This is Sean Baker's follow-up to his 2015 film Tangerine. That was a film acclaimed for its realism, its representation of a marginalised community, as well as being unique for being shot entirely on iPhones. But he returns to celluloid for The Florida Project. But what he doesn't what he doesn't lose is his care for both honest realism and the marginalized people that he focuses on. That remains the same. I'm not usually a big fan of films with extended scenes featuring child actors, but The Florida Project just has too much exuberance to not sit through most of the first half with a huge grin on your face. The fact that the 7-year-old lead actor Brooklyn Prince, the fact that she can steal a scene from Willem Dafoe, I think that says it all. I mean, Dafoe himself is excellent in the film. He's rightfully getting a lot of praise for it. He's one of those actors, like De Niro, where when he's in the role, you can't see him as anyone else. He's not Willem Dafoe, he is his character, in this case, Bobby. Bria Vinaiti is a newcomer that Baker discovered through Instagram, and she is similarly great, handing in what is easily one of the best debut performances of the year. She's got like such a good use of emotion where she never really lets on what she's thinking unless she gets like really angry, and then she's really scary. And the way that the plot develops is also one of the most unique elements to this film. It kind of convinces you at first that there isn't a plot, and then you realise there is, and the way it all kind of comes together is just so clever. It never wallows in sentimentality. It just allows its characters to be who they are, for better or worse. And they're so real that even days after seeing it, you'll think about them and just kind of hope they're doing all right. I'm not sure I'll be able to watch it again for a while. It is kind of tough in places, but the impact that it made on me means that it deserves being number 2 on this list.
I watched The Florida Project last night, and I'm kind of mad at myself for not putting it on my list, but I'm glad it's on yours because I really do want to talk about this film. Like you said, this is one of those rare stories that sticks with you after you see it, and when it pops into your head, the experience of watching it and all of those emotions kind of come flooding back. Which doesn't happen very often with films, not for me at least. This is actually the first of Sean Baker's films that I've seen. I'm definitely excited to kind of go back and watch Tangerine and some of his other films, just because I really enjoyed his style of filmmaking and the realism that he brought to the Florida Project. And like you said, the performances are some of the best in 2017. Brooklyn Prince amazed me in this film, just like Jacob Tremblay in Room. She kind of carries the entire film on her back, and it's not an easy performance, especially for someone of her age. We're seeing everything through Mooney's eyes and experiencing everything as she experiences it. So this is a really special and impressive kind of performance. Looking at Willem Dafoe, this is undoubtedly one of the best performances of his career. And I'm really glad to see that he's up for some awards because I really think this is a great performance and an equally great film. Alright, so I'll jump into my number 2, which is Logan. This film lands towards the top of the list because not only is Logan one of the best films of the year, but it also has one of the most unique, compelling, and enjoyable superhero stories of all time. What director James Mangold and Hugh Jackman have been able to do with this character and this universe is nothing short of incredible. Logan is unlike any other film in the genre, and while there's nothing wrong with your typical superhero Marvel movie, it's refreshing to see the film come along and give us something different. I think Logan is a film that has made people reevaluate what they think of the entire genre. There was this kind of idea, even after The Dark Knight, that a superhero film can't be emotional or thought-provoking, and I think Logan kind of came out and made people see that a superhero genre can be something completely different from what they expect. This is a film that wasn't afraid to take risks, and I'm so glad that they got James Mangold back to direct this one, because I kind of liked what he was trying to do with the Wolverine, and I think if he had been left alone to make his film and tell his story, that the Wolverine could have ended up being great as well. So yeah, I was really happy to see that he was going to do an R-rated Wolverine film without any studio meddling and with that R rating. And look at the result. Logan is the best film in the X-Men franchise. It's one of the most original and compelling superhero movies of all time. And more than anything, it's just an incredibly well-made, emotional, and gripping film. Of course, I've got to talk about Hugh Jackman's performance. This is the last time he's wearing the claws and it might be the best performance of his career, which is saying a lot. It's certainly his best outing as Wolverine. Some of the stuff we see Logan go through in this film, I mean, obviously he's older, he's not very well, and he's kind of living this messed up existence, and it takes a great actor like Hugh Jackman to pull some of these scenes off. I think the scene with Logan and Laura in the car when she's reading out the names in Spanish and hitting him, I think that's one of the best acted scenes of the year. And honestly, I'm really bummed out that Hugh Jackman isn't getting more recognition for his performance in this film. I think he was nominated for a Golden Globe for The Greatest Showman in musical or comedy. Obviously, Franco ended up taking that one home, but I really do think Jackman should be getting more recognition for his performance in this film, in the drama category. Also, how is Patrick Stewart not getting nominated for Best Supporting Actor? I've seen a lot of the films and performances that have been nominated at the Golden Globes this year. Patrick Stewart is easily the best supporting actor this year, so I'd say he kind of got snubbed there. But yeah, I think Logan is a truly great piece of filmmaking, which is why it's at my number 2.
Yeah, I mean, Logan, I feel like it's another kind of Dark Knight of its era because it's showing general audiences and not just superhero fans like what a superhero film can be. It's just like how The Dark Knight's not just a superhero film, it's also kind of like a noir thriller. Logan is like a noir road movie. So I think that's, it's pushing the boundaries a bit. In terms of Patrick Stewart, I think personally it's not going to be that role that he gets the nomination for. I think it's definitely going to be for his role as the poop emoji in the Emoji Movie. That's like a classic Stewart role there. I think he should definitely win it for that. Yeah, so Logan is, they've got Logan Noir as well, which is highlighting, you can put it in black and white and this is like a serious film. Right, so I'll get on to my number 1 choice. Kind of a controversial choice. It is Darren Aronofsky's Mother. First off, I just want to say I understand the criticism that it's received. I understand the hate it gets. In many ways, it is an incredibly pretentious movie, and I don't even like the word pretentious. I try not to ban that word around lightly, but Mother is definitely pretentious, kind of glaringly so in places. But I knew from the moment the film really started kicking into gear that this was going to be my favourite film of the year. I've always liked Aronofsky, particularly when he goes down the more sort of horror-styled route, like with Black Swan. That was my favourite of his before. But I think that this is his career best. It charges along at its own weird pace, just paying no regard to whether the audience is keeping up. It wears its biblical influences on its sleeve and works them hard. There's no true score to speak of, just strange sound effects like ringing noises and drones. The whole thing just seems to be as if it's trying to wind the audience up. But for me it just worked. It's like one of those dreams that some people get where you have to catch the train but you've lost your bags and nobody will speak to you and for some reason you can't run. It's like one of those crossed with the apocalypse. It's like a Revelation style anxiety dream. Jennifer Lawrence really surprised me in this film. I'd never seen her in anything before, so I was unsure of whether I'd like her or not. She mostly just walks around looking increasingly exasperated and the camera's right in her face, and she's brilliant. I don't understand, she gets so much feeling just from these tiny little facial expressions until I don't want to say too much for people who haven't seen it because that's a very big conclusion. But yeah, she was a great choice for the role. The supporting cast is all great too. It's always nice seeing Domhnall Gleeson along with his brother, and Kristen Wiig has a really, really weird cameo in it, which I thought was pretty funny. But the main draw for this film for me is just the pure visceral experience of it. There's nothing like it. It's flawed, and again, I understand the hate, but I think it's beautiful, and I think it's really, really ugly, and I just can't help but to love it, and that's why it's my number 1 film of the year.
Okay, so I kind of suspected that Mother would make your list. So in preparation, I watched the film last night, and I've got to say, I didn't hate it nearly as much as I expected to. I didn't see Mother when it was released, just because a lot of people that I know and trust told me that I wouldn't like it, and they were right. I don't like it. I think Mother, it's a messy film, and it kind of feels like Aronofsky dipped into his secret bag of herbs and spices, and this is like the insane kind of outcome of a crazy trip. I will say that the experience of watching Mother, it's unlike any other experience of watching a film ever. And while I can see what Aronofsky was going for, his style of filmmaking and storytelling, it's just not for me. One thing that I do want to say about Mother, though, is that all of the performances are really good. I think this is actually a really well-cast film, and I even ended up liking Jennifer Lawrence. I'm not usually a big fan of hers, but I think her performance kind of stood out. So I'm surprised to see her nominated for Razzies and stuff like that, because I really think she was good in the film. Even as someone who didn't enjoy Mother, I can recognise that the performances were all good. It was more the direction and the story that didn't really work for me. And while you might not like the word pretentious, I do, because that was one of my biggest issues with the film. And I think it's probably the reason it turned me off, because Mother it's quite a pretentious film, but it's also a difficult film to judge, because I'd recommend it, but I wouldn't really tell someone that it's a good film, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, I'd be very, very wary personally of even recommending it to most people. I recommended it to one of my friends who likes horror, and I was really worried that he was going to hate it. He didn't, which was nice, but at the same time it could have gone completely the other way. I mean, it doesn't really take any prisoners, and the whole pretentious thing, it really kind of... I'm not that good at picking up on messages when I'm watching a film, because I just get focused on the story. That's all I care about. So all of the biblical stuff passed me over, and when I sort of left the cinema, I was like, wow, that was amazing, and I thought more, and I was like, was he literally just telling us, like, the story of, like, the Bible, like, the Old Testament? But why? Oh, and there's all this Mother Nature stuff. I mean, it's all nice and good that he was doing that, but personally, I don't care about that side of it. I think it's nice that it's there, but for me, it's throwaway, and that's why it's pretentious, is that it's kind of shoving this message in your face when it's like, can we just watch the film, please?
Okay, so I'll finish off my list with my number 5, and I kind of spoiled what it was earlier in the show, because at 5 I've got Blade Runner 2049, which is a film that I never expected would be at the top of my list, because I'm not someone who loves or even really likes the original Blade Runner. Of course, I understand what it's done for the industry and how it's inspired a generation of filmmakers and all that kind of stuff, but in terms of storytelling and character, it's not a film that really works, not for me at least. With that said, Blade Runner 2049, it's nothing short of a masterpiece. Denis Villeneuve, who also directed Arrival, which is my favourite film of 2016 and one of the best sci-fi films ever, I think he's given us a truly great follow-up that not only lives up to the original, but eclipses it in every possible way. Unlike what Ridley Scott did with the original film, Villeneuve has told a very concise and captivating story, and he's filled it with some of the most stunning visual effects ever put on screen. But the film is so much more than just the visuals. I think the story is just incredibly captivating and emotional, and the acting in this film is amazing. Ryan Gosling kills it in this film, and Harrison Ford gives it everything he's got. I think you could kind of see with The Force Awakens that he was just there for the paycheck, but in this film it kind of seems like he really cares about the character and the story that Villeneuve was trying to tell. On a final note, I just want to touch on the score for 1 second, because the one thing I do love about the original film is the music, so it's not surprising that I loved the score for Blade Runner 2049. I've already bought the vinyl, but I know that you weren't a big fan of that score and the Hans Zimmer interference, but I think it brought enough new material while delivering what fans expect from the original. So for what it did for this film, I really like the score, but I do understand why someone who enjoyed the original would kind of see how it kind of overpowered some of the more intimate moments of the film.
Here's a good choice for a number 1 movie, I've got to say. Like, if it weren't for my weird little hang-ups about the score, it probably would... Well, I don't know if it'd be Mother, but it'd definitely be... It'd almost be a tied number 1, because everything that you said about it's, like, completely true.
Alright guys, that's it for my top 5, and I think that rounds us out for the second episode. So yeah, that's it for our ranking of the films in 2017. We're going to be back every single week with amazing new content, so make sure you hit like, please subscribe, do all that kind of stuff, and yeah, we'll be back next week with another new episode.
Yep, catch you guys next week.